So, hello everyone. Welcome to this next episode of Raw and Real, in which I want to discuss with you around the topic of navigating and overcoming being shortchanged and let down in life, and how to ask for help. And this topic took a while for me to form, to kind of congeal and gel together for me to be able to kind of bring this forward. And I have some things to share here, you know? And as always, on Raw and Real, I want to bring this in an open, compassionate, loving way, and yet without cutting short the truth of what is and being real with that. And the rawness is actually a very good name within that Raw and Real, is what I want to just mention here, because now that I think more and more about the name, I really like it because I feel quite raw in life. And that has a reason, because I've seen and experienced too much friction from things that didn't work in accordance with what they should have worked as, or what they were promised to be working as, or what people persuaded me that they would be like, right? And I see that not just for me. I mean, I can share all about my experiences, but I see that for people around me that are conscious or sometimes not conscious of that happening. And this is the fruit from which I'm, or the seed from which I'm birthing this episode. Maybe birthing is a big word, but just making this episode. So don't want to make it too exaggerated. It's just being real with what is. So first of all, I want to share with you, because on Raw and Real, we're also about defining concepts very clearly. Because what I see a lot, and this is the first port of call for our discussion here on this topic, is that I see, and even in myself, but I constantly am reminded of the fact that when I use terms, or when I refer to concepts, or when I speak in sayings or in visualizations, or whatever it is, we have associations with those, right? We have a certain interpretation of what they mean. But that is not necessarily what the other person speaking or receiving it means as well, or society or other people or a group of people. So we have to be very clear with what we mean with certain concepts. And I've seen that time and time again, where this misdirects people like yourself, where you get misdirected based on what you believe something is that you get told that it is, or a word gets used, a concept. Say, for example, community gets used, the word community. Well, what do you associate with the word community? If I say, well, I'm here to start a community, you may think that that means, oh, togetherness. And another person may think, oh, people that I can share all my shit with. And another person may think, love and physical touch. And those are all three very different things. They may all come together, or some of it may be part of that, or all of it, or none of it. But the point is, everybody has a different association with that word. And this is a very big misdirecting force, even in spirituality, because the problem with spirituality, from one level, why people love and hate it, some people are not into it, and other people are very much into it, is in part, the way I see it, because we are miscommunicating on what we mean with certain concepts that people aren't defining very well. And so they lead to disappointments, and they lead to misinterpretations. That's not the whole picture, because it also means that when we get clear, we'll notice that a lot of what we thought was true will fall apart. And this is where you can go through kind of a space of falling apart in your life, where everything that you idealized, right? Just like romantic relationships, where you have a definition or a concept of a version of what love is. And then that ends up not really being what it really is about. Well, then your life falls apart, right? Your relationship falls apart. your foundation that you've relied on and depended on and worked with maybe also falls apart. Psychically, you may fall apart. Emotionally, physically, financially. Go on with the list of things, right? So, and that's the process of awakening in a nutshell, really. It's letting old definitions die off and coming into new definitions of what is at a higher level. And so this is the key. What do I mean with at a higher level? Because some people will associate that with arrogance, superiority, and all that kind of stuff. Like we're at a higher, we're above you and you're below us and all that. That's not really what I mean, but that's why I hated the word for a long time. Because when healers and teachers that I followed and examples and use that word, sometimes I start to think, what do you actually, am I actually going to a higher level? And does it really feel good? Well, let me give you this explanation of that piece, right? Because this is really important. What I thought about just before I started this podcast about this definition of what is a higher level, as an example of what we're talking about here, is defining concepts. Yeah, is I don't know. I mean, some of you may love and some of you may hate it, but for those of you that know Lord of the Rings, the movie, I think it's actually The Hobbit, but it's the same, movie series, let's say. There's a scene in there in a forest where they're navigating their way to their destination in the whole movie series, right? And they're in the scene in the forest. And that forest is a magical forest. So it starts affecting their mind like a poison in a negative sense. And it's kind of a very symbolic way of defining this. And what they do eventually is this hobbit is kind of a little bit immune to the negative forces of life because he is very of purity, he's very good in his nature, in his character. So his personality isn't easily persuaded by the darkness. So this forest has minimal impact on him, but still has some impact, but not as much as some people that are going through a lot of this. Well, the point is that in that forest, the way that it starts turning on them. They start losing their way. The whole group, the collaborative team going through the forest starts losing themselves. And this hobbit climbs up the trees and goes to the top and goes above the forest and has this euphoric brightness of light that everything turns back to sweet and sound and normal, not influenced by the darkness of the forest, and sees the way, has an overview of the way, and sees that they're actually closer than they thought they were, because literally they weren't seeing, the expression is you're not seeing the forest for the trees. It's literally what that symbolizes, right? But then he has the vantage point. He has a higher perspective. He has an overview of what he needs to do. And from that place, this is what I mean by higher level. From that place of overview, that higher vantage point, you can make clear decisions that are in your best interest. That's what going to a higher level really means. It's not being better than others and superior than others and I'm further than others, although that may come into it a little bit. We're human and we feel entitled and all of that. But the point is that that's not really what it's about, right? It's about getting to a better positioning place from which you can see what other people are not seeing. And this is a large part of why humanity right now is so lost and confused and therefore doesn't make decisions in their best interest and starts falling apart in a bad way and sometimes in a good way. It depends from which place, which point or origin of consciousness they are falling apart from. Is it to get to a higher level, a higher vantage point, or is it to a more expanded state of love consciousness, or is it because they are falling apart because they are holding on to what isn't working and they're not moving forward in the right way for them, right? And that's also what we're seeing, these structures in life crumbling, right? But we all know that. I mean, I'm speaking to the choir here, right? But the point is that this is an important concept to define. So now you understand that concept a little bit better. And I may tweak things a little bit as I go along, but right now this is what I wanted to share about that. Now the next piece that I want to share is let's, again, for me also, take a moment to take that in, because that is, well, dare I say it, that is wisdom coming through. That is wisdom coming through me to share with you. It's what it is. And it's being clear. And that's the first piece here. The first takeaway for you during this podcast is when you don't want to be shortchanged, let down, abused anymore in your life, define concepts clearly and follow what is true for you. It's the first takeaway, right? Very important. And just hold love for yourself, compassion for what you've gone through in this arena of life, because you may have really experienced. I can get a sense that some of you watching this, or some of you that will be watching this, can kind of feel a thread to experiences of, quite dark experiences that some of you have maybe had around going down a rabbit hole that you actually ended up maybe not even wanting to go through. Now, there is light at the end of that tunnel, but it's not easy. And that's keeping it very simple when I say that. So take in some love for that, for yourself, right? Take that in. Now, the next piece, as we dig in a little bit deeper, kind of like a splinter where we're just like trying to get it out, we're just going deeper and it's inflaming the area a little bit more. But this is what is raw and real, right? I've experienced this dynamic that I wanted to share about, and I've seen it as well a lot with healers and teachers with their so-called abilities and gifts that they're here to bring to people. And this is a topic that's very charged because on the one hand, you have people that don't want anything to do with teachers and healers to follow because they're like, there's all cults and everything. Or we don't want anything to do with anyone telling me what to do or whatever it is, associations with that concept of having a mentor, a teacher, a guru, whatever it is. Yeah. But on the other hand, there's also people that need help and for whatever reason do want to follow teachers and healers. And I'm in that category. And then as a result, go down a rabbit hole that they may not necessarily know exactly what they're getting into. And so I'm here to share right now really clearly that I've seen, and not by any means everyone, of course, but the point is that in my experience, the louder someone is about what they have to bring into the world, the more careful you need to be. Because, and it's not about loudness. It's not like, how do I define this? It's when you get a sense, when you truly tune into feeling, which is the key here. And you know that certain people say that they have a gift or ability, and then maybe they do. Yeah. And see if this applies to you if you're in this category. But then they feel entitled to, for example, something I really hate in this is that they feel entitled to charge a lot of money for their work because they are here to help people, and maybe they are. But just because someone has a gift or an ability doesn't mean that they can help you. That's what I'm here to share right now. It doesn't mean that they're a match for you. It doesn't mean that this gift came down from God and that they deserve $1,200 for a session, and and it's a sin if they don't use their ability and their gift, and therefore they need to be able to do it that way. And it doesn't mean that you should follow them because they're special, and all that comes along with many people that do that I see do that. And this money thing is really crucial for me because it touches on something that I start to feel more and more that I find really impure, which is, and I'm going to say this again directly because this is going to trigger people, but I'm going to say it anyway. The American mindset is very oriented on charging a lot for your work, any work, because it's a very big thing there. So a lot of the people that I followed were on the one hand, America is good in a positive sense, because the USA has very much a pro entrepreneurial mentality where people strive to do innovative new things. But the flip side of that is they also like to charge a lot of money for things, and they are not ashamed of doing that. And here's where a piece comes in when you're doing that in the spiritual growth setting, where you need to be very pure about there's a dynamic here, and there's one part of this is that is a very good thing to be able to charge a lot of money for your delivery of your work because you are confident in what you bring, you have self-worth. But there's a shadow side to that, which is that I've seen healers and teachers manipulate people consciously and partly maybe unconsciously. I can't really tell what degree to which is what, but that doesn't matter right now. The point is they generate followers on the basis of a presumption that they've shared that they're here to help, and therefore you can be helped by them. And that's a presumption. And then they charge a lot of money, which I see many people don't have who do need help, which I find extremely painful to see. And I fell into that category as well. And it lost my train of thought here, but oh yeah, there's a shadow side to their self-worth, which is that they've actually, many people in that category that follow them may underestimate. Yeah, they may underestimate themselves. So they're in a position of low self-worth and they don't know what they're worth. And they need to follow someone to understand better who they are and what they're here to bring. But that healer's representing the opposite side of that same coin. He's representing an overconfident, cocky, arrogant perspective that is coming from an ego place that isn't really in alignment with the purity and truth, in my opinion. People will argue that, but that's my opinion. And then on top of that, they may overestimate themselves and their ability to help you. And they don't see that. And those are the dangerous people that actually we could frame as narcissists, but it is actually a narcissistic dynamic in which those healers are in a dependency. The more those, the followers are in a dependency situation, and the more that you are in a dependency situation because you truly need help, the more you'll fall likely prey to a dynamic where there's a narcissist on the other side that tells you that they're here to help you. That dynamic, a true healer that is awakened, that has a higher vantage point, which is, should be able to see their own deficiencies and own up to them if they want to be at the level that they say that they're at. But they often don't, because it goes against the grain of the marketing, their business, their agenda. That's not pure. And I really hate that dynamic because I've been down a rabbit hole, excuse me, of I've been locking up my throat here. I've been down a rabbit hole of that for years. And on the one hand, great learning. I got to see where I wasn't listening to myself, where I was outsourcing my wisdom to those healers and teachers, and I got a lot of benefit. It's not like they weren't able to help, but it depended on what definition, again coming back to the clear definitions, of help that I was looking for. I was looking also, this is my bit, I was looking from a very codependent place for a replacement of the issues that I wasn't able to solve in my life. And that help they couldn't bring me. But here's the catch. They did promise to change those dynamics based on their help. And even that didn't happen. At least not until now, to be fair. It's not like hasn't done good, but it hasn't happened. And then what I often see as well is I see teachers and healers sometimes dump that responsibility back on you the way that a narcissist would dump that back on a codependent person or a dependent person. And then they say, well, that's your responsibility. And then you get these groupies in these communities that follow that then also say, yeah, but you should have never depended on that type of help, and you should have never listened to that. You should do these things on your own, and healing isn't perfect, and this teacher also has limitations, and they're not, and then you get all the excuses, because that's what they are, because they're defending who they believe in, but often to their own expense, though, because they're also often, I see, following teachers and healers for years, not getting those results, but keep going. And that's the definition of insanity, right? Keep going when things aren't working, but keep trying anyway. And yet, within the abusive dynamics of their life, they're not seeing that very clearly, and they don't want to own up to it, because, and I know, because and it's hard, because when you are then being groomed, because that's what it's become for these people, and there's many of these people in these communities that do that, more than you think, then they lose their ability to, they become learned helpless, like they call that learned helplessness. They lose their own ability to say no. And I mean, I had this, so I'm very much speaking about myself as well, but I see it in people, painfully in people around me as well. And that's why I wanted to bring this up here. And I don't think that's a very pure situation. And maybe some people say, well, life isn't pure and life isn't fair and all that, and you do what you want and all that. I don't agree with that. I think that from a higher level, from a higher vantage point, from a meta level, I see the perfection of life and how it unfolds. And certain things are not in alignment with that perfection, and they're not good. And people don't speak up about them because they're scared. And so that becomes a trap. When you then follow those people, it becomes a trap, because that work is not necessarily good for you. And this is a form of new age abuse. It's what it is. Like in cults, where, the women thing, where they get taken advantage of and all that. We know the classic stories of cults, right? But this is a new form where this also becomes the same pattern, but in a different area. We won't do it in a sexual area anymore, but now we'll do it in a financial area. It's the same thing. You exchange your energy and your money and your time and your value, your essence, your energetic intention of who you are, in exchange for their dominance, power, status, money, ego, success, followers. And you are drawing the short straw in that dynamic, paying more, getting less. And there's a perfection to that, because it teaches you something, and the message will get louder. But I'm here to help you hopefully see that a bit sooner, so you don't have to go down that rabbit hole as deeply as I did, as painfully as I did. And again, it's not to say that there's no value in all of this, but I'm bringing very clearly to you what is not okay within that dynamic. Yeah. And it gets even a little bit worse. It gets a little bit worse, which is, the dynamic that I'm referring to that takes place, which is that it becomes more subtle after a while, where these healers and teachers can stand there with confidence, presenting themselves with their track record and persuade you with all their abilities and being deserving of all that they offer and telling you that you deserve the same and all that. Watch out for that dynamic as well, because because then they even sometimes go, and I've seen this, who you should watch out for that isn't as pure as they are, and other people and all that. And then they put themselves in a positive spotlight, giving you a fair warning about other people that aren't as good as, and that they are not good for you, and that everything you need, and they pretend like they're helping you discern who is not good for you, while they're standing right in front of you, and they may be the person that's not good for you. That's grooming again, whether they're conscious of that they're doing it or not, but they're being influenced by something that they've sold themselves to. It's literally what it is, sold themselves out to, sold their purity in exchange for a form of success, material wealth, the earthly riches, let's say. Yeah. So the constructive takeaway there is be very discerning. Be very discerning. Instead of being like enamored by someone's gifts or abilities, putting them on a pedestal, for example. Ask yourself, is this person aligned with my true needs and values? Does this person help empower me? Or do they in fact create a form of dependency, or that I'm dependent on them having the answers or the solutions or the healing or the work. And eventually I will get there. And again, be very careful, because even within that, there's layers, and it can shift. It just is an important reference point for yourself to really sit with, because that's the discovery of yourself. That's the empowerment too. And a little hint there, a lot of that has to do with the concept, the definition, again, that you hold, the association you hold with what a higher power really is. Or especially if they work from a level where they say, we're bringing something from the connection, from purity of God and the truth in the higher levels and the higher realms of the divine or source of creation, whatever you want to define it as, whatever words you want to use, religious or influenced or not. It's that relationship that's within yourself with that purity of the divine, that aspect of you that is part of that godly divine order, right? That determines also how you hook into that relationship externally in an authority, in an external authority that presents themselves as that to you. So you need to really get clear, as what I'm saying is about what that relationship for yourself is with that divine order. How do you not forsake yourself in following someone that espouses to be representative of a truth of a higher order? How do you not bypass yourself? How do you not shortchange yourself? Because then you're projecting that shortchangedness onto the healer that will shortchange you, because it's your own dynamic, right? So again, take a moment to take that in. Really take that in and feel love for yourself and compassion going through that, because it is not easy. You can see by the nuances, and this is the key that I'm bringing nuanced details, because the details matter. The devil is in the details. It isn't in the cookie cutter statements. It's in what do they actually mean. You And it actually goes a little bit further, because the next piece of this that I wanted to talk about, and I know we're already moving along fast here, is that work environments, they often mirror these same abusive dynamics that I was just speaking about as an example with healers and teachers that you follow. Because on a global level, on a collective global level, there's a lot of abuse going on in the relationship between people and their work environments. Because I see many people in a place of fear around doing what their boss says, or fearing losing their job, or basically being under a fear pressure and under the control of an external authority in the same dynamic. I had this because with my unique sensitivities and patterns, I always attracted the wrong work environment. So I have painfully horrific experiences with that, which shut me down from life. But basically, this has to do with an inner pattern of being in a self-disempowering position and a victim position, which attracts an abusive, narcissistic work environment, which I see many people share. Oh, my employer does this and that, and he's very abusive, and he doesn't listen to me, and he doesn't respect me, and he dumps all this shit on me, and if I do this, then he gets angry, and all of that. That's one of those examples, and I see it everywhere, because society has become more like that, because people have stood up less for themselves, And it's the same dynamic as with these healers and teachers externally, and it's the same dynamic as this narcissistic pattern with abusive relationships, romantic relationships, where we have very many examples of people being in those kind of situations. It's all a reflection from a higher level, a higher vantage point of the same dynamic playing out at different levels, domains of life and society, that's coming from the same inner state. And most people are not willing, most people, in fact, I believe, are not really willing to look at that, because then they have to confront the way that their life is structured that serves them by keeping them in a place where they're comfortable, basically. And I understand, I'm not blaming those people, but it has a consequence that you sacrifice the purity of your true self, and that's going to cost you more and more when you do that. And I couldn't do it anymore. It was horrific. And from that higher level, what happens then is when you suppress the truth of yourself, and everything revolves around what you need to do externally by avoiding the truth, and you're not sharing what I'm sharing here on Raw and Real, and you're not being truthful to yourself, then that suppression starts controlling you. And this is where these people hook into your life. And it all has to do with saying no more, setting clear boundaries more, which is what sensitive people have difficulty with, because they've had so much negative experiences with standing up for themselves. This is a part of empowering yourself to get out of that disempowering dynamic. Yeah, and we all know this. This is not new, but it's just maybe a new way in which I'm bringing it. So the takeaway there is to empower yourself by recognizing these abusive dynamics going on, where you're being shortchanged and let down and disappointed and all that. Setting boundaries, even small ones if you have to, within yourself in daily life, by saying no to things that don't matter or that don't have consequences for you, and use that as a starting point to break that cycle of disempowerment. Take that in. Yeah. I'm on a roll here, right? But I'm getting into this. You know, a couple of podcasts here, and this Raw and Real thing's really working for me. I hope it's working for you. I have no control over that, but I hope so. The final point I want to make before we go is how to ask for help. For some reason, that came up as the final part of what I wanted to share. And asking for help, it is the key. It's very important, especially if you're going through a lot like what I've just described. And many of you will be, because this is what I see everywhere. I'm family members, friends, people around on forums, society, news. So this is part of what we're going through now, is not to be discerning and careful not to ask for help from the narcissistic people, like maybe family members that tell you what, fill in what they think you need, right? Or teachers or healers that have an agenda for what they think that you need based on their agendas and what is not in your best interest, right? That just inflames your life. I got to a very highly inflamed state in my body physically from the toxicity, from not listening to myself and externalizing my need onto those healers, right? And onto those teachers and onto other people, because I was outsourcing it, like I shared many times now, but because I just didn't have a better solution. So it's not to blame myself, you know. And if you are, again, follow the Buddhistic, loving, compassionate self peace here. Be loving and kind to yourself. But being aware of that when you're asking for help, because it's not true support always. You know, I attracted from healers a thing that kind of inflated my ego, but in a way it was this mixed, because it was also partly true and good, but also destructive to my self-worth, which is the pattern where they made inflated promises and had narcissistic visions about how, well, I call it narcissistic visions, but they had these big examples of how my life was going to unfold and how beautiful and amazing it was going to be and how many people I was going to help. And maybe that will unfold, maybe it won't. But the point is, if you start getting that, is that starts feeding your ego, it's not helping, right? And how I would be helped by their work, well, yeah, maybe, but not for $1,200 a session. That's just ridiculous. If we had unlimited abundance and that was real, maybe then it wouldn't matter. But we don't have unlimited abundance because we're living on earth. It's another spiritual concept I'm going to talk about another time that I have a different definition about. It's not like we should be open to the unlimited nature of what's possible, but we have to be realistic. And my definition of being realistic is very different, seemingly, than many of these spiritual teachers that want to give you like these beautiful, idealistic examples of how life is so that they can charge more money. That's just ridiculous. That is so abusive to people because many people just are struggling and they need help. And the irony is these people are saying, well, I'm here with this gift of God to help people. Well, if you're here to help people, then why are you charging them that much money that they can't afford help? It's just silly. It's just, and this is not just, I'm picking on spirituality now, but this is happening everywhere. It's supermarkets, grocery stores, companies, enterprises, governments, everywhere. People just rip people off more and more, and they do it more in the open. Insurance companies. I mean, I can talk for hours about all of these dynamics in detail. It's incredibly, the whole world is full, it's oozing out of the collective humanity, all this abuse and distortion. And we're all sort of trying to make our best and pretend, for many of us, that it isn't happening or not see it or all of it. But people are waking up to it because you can't ignore it anymore. It's in our faces, it's blowing up in our faces, basically. But anyway, I digress. Don't want to be too negative here, but I do want to be real. So it's that balance point again, right? There's a piece there that I wanted to say that we're going a bit over time, but those promises that I keep sharing that aren't being delivered or not being met by people that are in positions of bringing you support or healing or any kind of service, right? The reason that these promises become broken and that they can't deliver them any longer also has to do actually with that behind those promises, there's no longer a substance behind their claims. And the reason for that is because timelines are shifting. It's kind of a weird concept, but I'm going to go with it as I speak to you, but bear with me on that. But the point is that, and I won't explain it all here right now, but the point is that unawakened people that are not at the level of seeing what the big picture is yet, they don't see that that's going on and that things are changing, timelines are shifting, new energies are coming in, old things are going away, our concepts and definitions are shifting, life is shifting and changing, and it's like being on an earthquake. Everything's moving around and rearranging itself. And so that's what's happening on a level of deep inner spiritual work. At some level, that's what's happening. And it means that the things that these people, they stay stuck in an old pattern of thinking that the way things were is also the way things still are now. And so they still think that the promises that they used to be able to make are still the promises that they can still now make, because they're riding on the past and they're riding on the reputation of the past and the stories and their belief systems of the past, and they are shifted. And so what matters is that it's hard to describe here how that works, but the point is that what I want to share on Raw and Real here is how you become aware of that and see it and know it for yourself, so you don't get disappointed, so that you can see ahead of them not yet seeing that those beliefs, that those promises, that they're not going to be able to deliver on those, because that's going to happen more and more. I feel we're going to have to depend on ourselves in ways that we didn't think we could, rather than depend on other people delivering their promises. And that's the unfortunate reality of that. I find it unfortunate because I don't like it, but it is what it is, right? And I have examples of that. I don't know if that will all take too long right now, but the point is that relying on people becomes an issue then. Relying on people to support you. And that's, I guess, the constructive takeaway there is the short version of saying this is that have people that are very close to you, a small network or group of people that you can really depend on in the right way, and become as self-sufficient as you can and as independent as you can. And that's more difficult and easier said than done. But take that in, you know? And what to do about all of that. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I became sour, embittered, disgruntled. Obviously, that's not the answer. The honest answer is I don't really know. Um, acknowledge the complexity of those difficulties and admit that it's not that it's okay not to have all the answers, as I'm doing. And true support, understand that true support comes from the people who listen to you without an agenda. Seek help from people who empower yourself and your autonomy, your journey, and not just say that they will, but actually do. This is the discernment piece you need to make for yourself, rather than trying to mold you into their vision of what it should be like, what life should be like. And ultimately separate yourself from that. That can be part of the journey too. You can use that to strengthen yourself. And that actually means, what does it mean to trust yourself, right? And what does that actually mean? That means actually learning to listen to yourself. Because otherwise, trusting yourself becomes another cookie cutter empty concept. Yeah, I'm trusting myself. But are you actually listening to yourself? Maybe not, while you think that you're trusting yourself. Otherwise, you end up in the listening to others, broken promises, no substance behind them, false light, deception, domain, again, that we've been talking about this whole podcast. You don't want to end up there. You really don't. So that's for today what I wanted to bring. Hopefully this was good information for you and it helped you embody a little bit more of these, well, dare I say, higher level frequencies. This wisdom that comes down from a higher perspective of life, because this is what we need to make interconnections between different situations that people don't make their connections with, that they don't understand the interrelationship between. This is the key. This is what I live my life that way. It can be exhausting because you see so many connections between everything that you think you're going crazy, which almost is something that you are going crazy. But the point is that it also is very useful if you understand the bigger picture, because that's actually the most important picture to have, to understand, so that you can make better decisions for yourself. All right, I'll see you on the next podcast. Hopefully, until next time, bye-bye.